Welcome to the 700 Club. Destroying women's sports, compromising their safety and their privacy. Well, that could be the outcome of President Biden's push to redefine a federal law called Title IX. 50 years ago, the law was established to prohibit sex-based discrimination in higher education. Now the administration wants to expand it to protect gender identity. Heather Sells has the story.
The Education Department has made clear for months that it plans to change Title IX from a federal law created to protect girls' rights in school and sports to one that also protects gender identity.
It's based wholly on someone's subjective gender identity.
The Washington Post is reporting the proposed change, and legal analyst Sarah Parshall-Perry says it's no surprise given the administration's priorities. The proposal is a dramatic redefinition of the groundbreaking civil rights law designed to level the playing field for women. It would expand Title IX's meaning of sex discrimination to include sexual orientation and gender identity.
It's not only going to eliminate athletic opportunities for young girls and women, it's going to eliminate their sense of safety, security, and privacy.
Conservative legal scholars like Perry and a number of feminists agree that if men identifying as women can compete against women and share their locker rooms and bathrooms, it will erase women's sports along with their private spaces. They point to NCAA swimmer Leah Thomas, formerly Will Thomas, who became a national champion in his first season competing against women. Former Education Secretary Betsy DeVos is also concerned, calling the administration out of line. Congress has not acted, which is how our system of government requires such changes to be made, she argued recently.
I want you to know that your president sees you.
But President Biden is firmly committed to anyone who says they're changing their gender, and he wants their parents on board.
To parents of transgender children, affirming your child's identity is one of the most powerful things you can do to keep them safe and healthy.
It's why Health and Human Services is also working to redefine sex, making it illegal for healthcare providers and parents potentially to refuse what's known as gender-affirming care.
Parents as well who refuse to affirm those gender identities of their minor children could be deemed to be unsafe or abusive parents.
Proposed rules in education and health need merely to go through a public comment period, and then they can become legally binding, Gordon.
Well, Heather, how likely is it that this Title IX change will take effect?
Well, just to put it in perspective, Gordon, the Biden administration announced on day one via an executive order that they were going to look at all regulations in all departments and look at them through the lens of the 2020 Bostock decision and add gender identity protections in. So that's the backdrop to this. In terms of timing right now, we are expecting these proposed regulations to come out in the next month. Then there is a 30 to 60 day comment period. And then the department has to look at all the comments. So potentially this fall, we could be seeing these regulations put into place. But then we are, of course, also expecting legal challenges. And in fact, just yesterday, Fox News is reporting that 15 attorneys generals are saying they are going to fight back in regards to these proposed regulations.
Well, you mentioned Bostock. Is this another case where the Supreme Court is creating legislation by changing what the word sex means in particular? In that one, it was all about sex discrimination at the workplace. Are they just saying we're going to take that decision and now make it federal law for Title IX?
Well, yes, indeed. The Biden administration has a different view of Bostock. They are broadly interpreting it. The Trump administration was narrowly interpreting it and saying it just applied to employment. But the Biden administration is saying, look, we need to review all regulations in light of Bostock. So potentially we are looking at very wide sweeping changes in education, in healthcare. And I think it's in some ways we've known this was coming, but in some ways I think the general public is just not aware of what is coming down the pike.
All right, well, let's talk about what's coming down the pike. What's the risk to parents who don't affirm children who say, well, I believe I'm of another sex? What's going to happen to them?
Right. Well, and that is exactly what the 15 attorneys generals were pointing out in their letter to the Department of Education. They were saying, we are very concerned about parents' rights. We're concerned that parents aren't going to have a say when it comes to things like gender issues. And we're already seeing this play out in a number of schools where there is counseling that's taking place around gender issues, that parents are being kept out of the loop. So that's a big concern. I will add that there is also a growing bipartisan parents movement in this country. Parents are more aware of what is going on in education than they have ever been. And there are these public comment periods that will be coming up where people can respond and where the Biden administration will be gauging the political winds, if you will. And there's also school board elections coming up. So there is a lot going forward. There's going to be a lot of public debate around this issue, Gordon.
All right, well, let's talk about one of the main areas for public debate, which is HHS might issue a similar rule, now mandating health care coverage and, I assume, health care treatment for transgender services. What impact will that have on employers, hospitals, and especially parents?
Well, this is really stunning here, what the potential ramifications could be. The Catholic News Service is reporting that the Catholic Benefits Association, which oversees or is an association for Catholic employers, has received some documents that indicate that there are going to be mandates in terms of surgical abortion, in terms of transgender hormones, transgender surgery, that they are going to require all healthcare providers to provide these types of services. And this is just going to be a no-go for Catholic hospitals. They're not going to be able to abide by this. They have got 1/6 of all the hospital beds in the country. So the potential ramifications of some of these HHS regulations that we think are going to be coming out in the next month are really significant and could affect, of course, more than Catholic hospitals, could affect faith-based employers of all kinds. And it's not looking, Gordon, like there's going to be religious exemptions. So potentially some really significant changes coming forward.
All right. Well, Heather, thanks for the insights. This is definitely, we're getting into some troubled waters here. Just look at that statistic. 1/6 of all hospital beds are done by Catholic charities. Hospitals were essentially created by Christians. This is our heritage. You can look at the medical history of mission work. You look at the medical history of Europe and America. These were all founded initially on Christian precepts. Let's heal the sick. Let's help the poor. Let's do good to other people. Now that we're becoming increasingly secularized, and when you have an administration that seems to want to drive wedge issues, you're going to see those religious rights trampled. I hope some common sense comes into Congress and to the administration saying, why are you trying to divide us even more? If a Catholic hospital wants to provide hospital services, they have a perfect right to. If a Presbyterian hospital wants to provide hospital services, they have a perfect right to, and you can't come in and mandate things that are against their religious conscience. Let us establish freedom of conscience, freedom of belief, freedom of religion as a bulwark of American society, and stop trying to impose your view on people who are just trying to do good. In other news, a political crisis is looming in Israel after the governing coalition lost a key member. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Gordon. A member of Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's coalition quit today, claiming Israel is losing its Jewish identity under the current government. Edith Silman's departure raises the possibility of new elections less than a year after the government took office. While Bennett still remains in power, instead of a 61-59 majority, he now oversees a Knesset that stands at 60-60. That will make it difficult for the government to function or pass legislation. Opposition leader and former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed Silman's decision. Well, turning now to the crisis in Europe, Ukraine's president called on the United Nations to boot Russia off the UN Security Council for atrocities against civilians. This as the world prepares more sanctions against Russia and the United States sends more arms to Ukraine. Charlene Aaron has the story.
Speaking to the UN Security Council Tuesday, President Zelensky called on the body to hold Russia accountable for war crimes as he laid out the atrocities committed by Russian forces in the town of Bucha.
They were killed in their apartments, houses, blowing up grenades. The civilians were crushed by tanks while sitting in their cars.
He also urged reform at the UN by kicking Russia out of the Security Council and removing its veto power.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to close the UN? Do you think that the time of international law is gone? If your answer is no, then you need to act immediately.
While the Russians are calling the images out of Bucha fake, testimonies of survivors are coming out every day. The victims include innocent men, women, and children, some apparently tied up, tortured, and shot at close range. This man says men younger than 50 were lined up and shot on the spot. He survived because he's 53.
What we've seen in Bucha is not the random act of a rogue unit. It's a deliberate campaign to kill, to torture, to rape, to commit atrocities.
President Biden and European leaders are set to announce more sanctions against Russian government officials and their family members. The European Union reportedly proposing sanctions directly against Vladimir Putin's two daughters. The U.S. is also sending an additional $100 million in security assistance to Ukraine, helping its military secure more Javelin anti-armor systems. Meanwhile, Russian forces continue to deploy to the south and east. Human rights groups say the situation in the besieged city of Mariupol is desperate, and the atrocities there are likely much worse. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Thanks, Charlene. Well, in the face of these horrifying crimes, millions of Ukrainians are fleeing the country. Just over the border in Poland, one mother shared her story of escaping the war and finding help from CBN's Operation Blessing.
It was very scary in our village. Soldiers were already in our village, and that meant Russians were there too. They started shooting. That's when I got really scared. I have two children, so I decided to take them and leave for their sake. The shooting was so loud.
As Jana and her children made the long journey to the Polish border, they saw staggering signs of violence within their country.
We passed Russian checkpoints, and in the field, you could see unexploded projectiles. We were driving, and my son said, "Mom, look, something is sticking out of the ground."
When Jana's family reached the Polish border, they saw the Operation Blessing signs and team members ready to greet them.
Everyone was so polite. First, they gave the kids and me food. Then they gave us something hot to drink. They gave us winter clothes and took us to a tent to warm up.
Thanks to the generosity of Operation Blessing partners, we're providing critical supplies, food, and shelter to refugees.
Thank you very much. From the bottom of my heart, with a pure heart, I'm so grateful. There are a lot of people like me with kids who come here without anything, and we don't know where we are going. We only know we have to escape the war. I don't know how to express it, so I just want to say thank you.
With so much destruction and destroyed lives, the need is great. Gordon?
That thank you goes all the way from that refugee to your home. If you're part of this Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund, it's going to you. People are giving thanks to you for what you're doing to help them. We can't do it on our own, but when we pull together, when tens of thousands of people say, yes, let's make a difference here. We can't go and fight the battle. Some of us can't go to Ukraine or Poland, but we can all pull together to say, yes, let's make a difference. And we're doing it in your name when you give to the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. It's real easy to do. All you have to do is pick up the phone and call us, 1-800-700-7000. Say, I want to give to the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. You can also write to us at CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463. Just write Disaster Relief Fund in the memo line of a check. You can text OB Crisis to 71777, or you can go to cbn.com. Either way, do it now. You're supporting all of the centers. If I can get that map up, you can see all the different centers where Orphans Promise has been operating. Operation Blessing has been in Ukraine for 30 years, Orphans Promise for 20 years. These are established centers where we're doing work, some of them right in the middle of the war zone, but we're doing things in your name. We're giving people food, water, clothing, warm clothing, housing, shelter, and we're doing it on your behalf when you join with us. So if you want to be a part of it, call us, 1-800-700-7000.